I'm here at St. Stephen's Catholic Church in Portland, Oregon, and we are in the midst of Holy Week. During Holy Week, as we are also in Passiontide, we focus on the Passion of the Lord. Now, one interesting character in the Passion of the Lord is Pontius Pilate. Well, what does Jacobus Voragine have to say in chapter 53 of the Golden Legend on the Passion of the Lord? What follows is what we read in a history, admittedly apocryphal, concerning the origin and punishment of Pilate. There was a king, Tyrus by name, who seduced a girl named Pilate, daughter of a miller called Aris, and had of her a son. When her son was born, Pilate gave him a name composed of her own and her father's, and called him Pilatus, or Pilate. And when Pilate was 3 years old, his mother sent him to the king, his father. The king already had a son born of the queen, his wife, and this son was almost the same age as Pilate. As they grew older, the two often competed with each other at wrestling, boxing, and shooting with a sling. But the king's legitimate son, just as he was of nobler birth, showed himself more vigorous and skillful in every sort of contest. And Pilate, consumed with jealousy and suffering from liver trouble, killed his brother in secret. When King Tyrus learned what had happened, he was grief-stricken and called his council together to decide what should be done with this criminal, murderous son of his. All were agreed that he was worthy of death, but the king, upon reflection, was unwilling to pile one wrong upon another, and sent Pilate to Rome as a hostage for the tribute that he owed annually to the Romans. He hoped by this means to purge himself of the murder of his son and to be freed of the Roman tribute. Now at that time there was in Rome a son of the king of France, who likewise had been sent there in lieu of tribute. He and Pilate became comrades, but Pilate, seeing himself surpassed by the other both in character and in action, and goaded by the stings of envy, took his companion's life. Now the Romans, wondering what to do with him, said, "If this fellow who slew his brother and strangled a hostage is allowed to live, he can be mighty useful to the Republic. And being a brute himself, he will know how to handle our brutish enemies." They therefore decided, he must be judged worthy of death, but let him be posted as a judge to the island of Pontius, where the people have never tolerated a judge. If his wickedness can tame their perversity, all the better. If not, let him get what he deserves. So Pilate was sent to Pontus and its hard-headed people. He knew that they were destroyers of judges and that his life hung in the balance. So he quietly worked out ways to save his skin, and by threats and promises, torture and bribery, completely subjugated this rebellious crowd. His victory won for him the title of Pilate of Pontus, or Pontius Pilate. Herod heard about this man's way of doing things, and being a crafty schemer himself, was delighted with the other's stratagems, and sent envoys with gifts and an invitation to visit. And then he made Pilate his deputy and gave him power over Judea and Jerusalem. Pilate proceeded to amass great wealth and went to Rome without informing Herod. In Rome, he offered the emperor Tiberius a huge sum of money and pressed the ruler to vest him outright with the powers he held from Herod. This gave rise to enmity between the two until the time of the Lord's Passion, when Pilate, to conciliate Herod, sent Christ to him. The scholastic history tells us that there was another reason for their hostility. There was an individual who claimed to be the Son of God and beguiled a great many people in Galilee. He led his followers to Gerizim, where he said he was going to ascend into heaven. Pilate came upon them and killed them all, because he feared that the people of Judea might likewise be misled. And this caused enmity between him and Herod, because Galilee was in Herod's jurisdiction. Both of these reasons may well be true. When Pilate had handed Jesus over to the Jews to be crucified, He was afraid that his condemnation of innocent blood might offend Tiberius Caesar, and dispatched one of his familiars to make a case for him to the emperor. Meanwhile, it was announced to Tiberius, who was seriously ill, that in Jerusalem there was a physician who cured all diseases by his word alone. Therefore the emperor, not knowing that Pilate and the Jews had put this physician to death, said to one of his intimates, whose name was Volusian, "Cross the sea as far as you can, and tell Pilate to send this healer to me, so that he may restore me to health." Volusian came to Pilate and delivered the emperor's command, but Pilate, terror-stricken, asked for a fortnight's grace. During this time, Volusian made the acquaintance of a woman named Veronica, who had been in Jesus' company, and asked her where he might find Jesus, Christ. She answered, "Alas, he was my Lord and my God." And Pilate, to whom he was handed over through envy, condemned him and commanded that he be crucified. Volusian was grieved at this and said, "I am deeply sorry that I cannot carry out the orders my master gave me." Veronica answered, "When the teacher was going about preaching, and I, to my regret, could not be with him, I wanted to have his picture painted, so that when I was deprived of his presence, I could at least have the solace of his image. So one day I was carrying a piece of linen to the painter, when I met Jesus, and he asked me where I was going. I told him what my errand was. He asked for the cloth I had in my hand, pressed it to his venerable face, and left his image on it. If your master looks devoutly upon this image, he will at once be rewarded by being cured." "Can this image be bought for gold or silver?" Volusian asked. "No," Veronica replied. "Only true piety can make it truly effective. Therefore I will go with you and let Caesar look upon the image, after which I will return home." So Volusian came to Rome with Veronica and told Tiberius, "The Jesus you have long desired to see was unjustly given over to death by Pilate and the Jews, and by reason of their envy nailed to the gibbet of the cross. However, a lady came to me with a picture of Jesus, and if you look at it devoutly, you will obtain the benefit of your health." Caesar, therefore, had the road carpeted with silk cloths, and ordered the image brought to him, and the moment he looked at it, he won back his pristine health. Pontius Pilate was then taken prisoner at Caesar's command and shipped to Rome. And when the emperor heard that he had arrived, he was filled with fury and had him brought into his presence. Pilate, however, had taken with him the Lord's seamless tunic and came before the emperor wearing it. As soon as Tiberius saw him clothed in the tunic, his anger vanished. He rose to meet Pilate and could not address a harsh word to him. So the emperor, who when Pilate was absent seemed so terrible and furious, now in his presence was somehow calmed. As soon as he had given him leave to go, on the other hand, he was again afire with rage and called himself a wretch for not having showed the culprit the anger that was in his heart. Swearing and protesting that Pilate was a son of death and that it was not right to let him live on the earth, he at once had him called back. But when he saw him, the emperor greeted him, and his wrath subsided. All wondered, and he himself wondered, that he could be so wrought up against Pilate absent, and could not so much as speak to him harshly when he was present. At length, at a sign from God, or perhaps a hint from some Christian, he had the man stripped of that tunic, and instantly his previous rage was rekindled. The emperor's astonishment mounted until he was told that the tunic had belonged to the Lord Jesus. He had Pilate remanded to prison until he could consult with a council of wise men about what should be done with the criminal. Pilate was forthwith sentenced to a shameful death. But when he heard of this, he killed himself with his own knife, and so ended his life. When Caesar was informed of this, he said, "Truly, he died a most shameful death, and his own hand did not spare him." The corpse was weighted with a huge stone and thrown into the Tiber. But wicked, foul spirits made sport of the wicked, foul body, plunging it into the water and snatching it up into the air. This caused awesome floods in the water, and lightning, tempests, and hailstorms in the air, and a widespread panic broke out among the people. The Romans, therefore, pulled the body out of the Tiber, and, as a gesture of contempt, carried it off to Vienne, and dumped it into the Rhone. The name of the city comes from Via Gehennae, the road to hell, because at that time it was a place of malediction. Or more likely the city was called Vienne or Bienna, because it was said to have been built in a biennium. But there again the wicked spirits rallied and stirred up the same disturbances, and the people, refusing to put up with so great a plague of demons, removed that vessel of malediction from their midst and consigned it to burial in the territory of the city of Lausanne. There the populace, harried to excess by the aforesaid upheavals, took the body away and sank it in a pit surrounded by mountains, where, according to some accounts, diabolical machinations still make themselves felt. Thus far we have quoted the aforementioned apocryphal history. Let the reader judge whether the story is worth telling. It should be noted, however, that the scholastic history tells us that the Jews accused Pilate to Tiberius of the savage massacre of the innocents, of placing pagan images in the temple despite the protests of the Jews, and of appropriating money taken from the corbona or poor chest for his own uses, such as building a water conduit into his house. For all these misdeeds he was deported into exile at Lyon, his city of origin, and there he died, despised by his own people. It could be, if there is any truth to this story, that Tiberius had decreed his exile and had him deported to Lyon before Volusian came back to Rome from Jerusalem and reported to the emperor. But then, learning how he had put Christ to death, had the miscreant brought out of exile and returned to Rome. Neither Eusebius nor Bede says in his chronicle that Pilate was exiled, but only that he suffered many calamities and died by his own hand. And there we have the apocryphal history as passed down from Jacobus Voragine in the Golden Legend. Well, there we have a character of the Passion. And if you look here in the first station of the cross above my finger, you will see Pilate seated with a wreath around his head, a laurel wreath. Well, let us continue to prepare for Passiontide, and I hope to join you again very soon with more characters from the Passion. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.